Now, what we usually do is we start off talking about the topic with a Hawaiian legend that's related. This time is going to be slightly different because I'm going to briefly give you a series of legends. And so we'll start this way. Ikawa kahiko, mamoaloa o Kapenakuke. Once upon a time, long before Captain Cook, there was a child born in these islands. Different islands say he was born there, but what we do know is he was born in the shape of a rope. Not just the shape of the rope, but in the form of a rope. Now that, at first, when we hear this from a Western point of view, sounds really weird, okay? But there's a reason for it. When the Hawaiians were telling their stories, what was important, now we're trying to translate them into English, but in Hawaiian, many important words have multiple meanings. And a lot of the enjoyment of listening to a story in Hawaiian, if you know Hawaiian, is that you can catch double, triple, quadruple meanings when a particular word is said to describe something. So the word here is, there's two words. One is kaula. Kaula means rope. The other word is kaula. It sounds a lot, but that's not the same. It's a different word. It means magician. And so in legends about people or beings who were born with magical powers, why being born in the form of a rope is very commonly said, and it means that they had magical powers, okay? Because the words sound so similar. So Maui was born in this way. Now, there are lots and lots of legends that were told about Maui, not just in Hawaii, but all around the entire Pacific. It's one of the oldest legendary characters, most widespread, even beyond the borders of Polynesia, is this character Maui Kupua. The translation of that is difficult because it could be Maui the trickster, Maui the demigod, Maui the hero, Maui the shaman, okay? Any of these could be applied to that word kupua. Maui the magician, almost forgot that one. So this child was born, and all these stories are told. So famous, so much a part of the important part of the culture, even though they're very, very ancient stories. There's a creation chant. It's called a creation chant. It's also a genealogical chant. It's called the Kumulipo. And a good section of that is taken up by describing the stories of Maui and the feats that he did. The feats are what we're going to talk about. There are a lot of different kinds. The Kumulipo talks about at least 10 or 12 different ones that it describes, very briefly. But there's many, many more. And some of them occur in the North Pacific that don't occur in the South, and vice versa. But the majority of, and this is the reason we're using Maui, the majority of his adventures had to do with helping people. That's what's significant. So I'll just give you 5 of these briefly about them. One of them, to start with, was the legend of Maui pushing up the sky. So as the legend goes, there was a time, and this had to be a very long time ago, when the sky was so low that everybody crawled around along the ground. And it was very uncomfortable, but the sky was just too low, but nobody thought about it. And one time Maui's crawling along and he bumps into somebody, kind of twists his head to look up, and there's a very pretty girl. And she's getting kind of tired of this low sky. She says, Maui, you've got all of this magical power. How about pushing up the sky? And Maui thinks about it for a bit, and he says, oh, okay, I'll tell you what. You give me a drink from your gourd, and I'll push up the sky for you. And that's a euphemism, if anybody wants to stop and figure it out. So Maui gets up from where he is, gets on his knees, and starts to push the sky up. Then he gets it up high enough, he starts to climb a hill, and he pushes it up higher. Finally, to make it short, he climbs the highest mountain and pushes the sky all the way up to where it is today. And it's because of Maui that people all over the world today can walk upright. And not even just walk upright, but walk on the moon. And that's all thanks to Maui. So that's one of the stories. Another story, a well-loved story, is finding the secret of fire. Now this goes back a long, long way too, because there's different versions of these stories. So I'm picking ones that are more well-known. But long, long time ago, nobody knew how to use fire. And everybody had to eat their food raw. And it didn't always taste very good. Now they knew about fire. Of course, there were fires from the volcanoes, eruptions. But every once in a while, up in the forest, they'd see fire. And they knew what it was, because even sometimes lightning would strike. But this was different. It was like it would be there for a while, and then it would go out. Another night, it'd be in a different place maybe, and it would go out. So they knew something was going on, but no one did anything about it. Until the day that Maui's mother, her name was Huna. And I have to say, it doesn't matter whether it's Maui's mother, his sister, his grandmother, his wife, she's always named Hina. And Hina was known as associated with the moon, as well as the tides and the ocean. And the most powerful work that women did, which was the beating of the top of cloth, making the clothing. So Hina is getting fed up with raw food. And she says, Maui, you got to do something about this. And Maui never thought of doing anything about it before, but he said, okay, I'll see what I can do. So he goes up to the mountains, because last time they saw fire. And he goes up and he searches around, and there he sees a clearing. And it's surprising because there's a fire in the center of the clearing, and around the fire are these birds. And they're called alai birds. We would call them mud hens. Okay, it's a black bird, swims almost like a duck, and has a red streak on the top of the head. I'll tell you how that got there. But so he saw these birds around the fire. So he starts to go over to them to see what they're doing and how they're doing it. And the birds notice him, and they all scratch out the fire and run away. He tries this several more times. He can't get near them enough to see what's going on. He goes and tells his mother. He says, hey, Mom, it's not working. I can't do this. And so she gives him some tips on, he's going to have to capture one of the alai birds and get the information that way. Well, I want to tell the whole story. So he does this, goes back up, manages to capture one of the alai birds. And the alai bird lies like mad because he tries to give him all kinds of false information. But Maui has never let him go, so he doesn't have to catch him again until finally he forces the bird to tell him in the form of a riddle. Maui figures this out, learns the secret of fire, brings it down, not only to make a fire for his mother, but to share the secret with everybody. And that's why we have the secret of fire today. Okay? And all the many multiple uses of it that we can do. Next was, not next in sequence, but another story, snaring the sun. This is a real popular one. It's supposed to take place on the island of Maui. By the way, here's another little difference. The island of Maui is Maui. The hero is Maui. Slight difference. But they're so similar that Hawaiians, forget about it. Just relate them because they're similar. So, anyway, he's over there, and we'll say it's on Maui Island. And again, it's his mother. This time, she's having a problem because one of the things she does is beat top of cloth. Tapa cloth is made from the bark of a tree. There's several different kinds. And what they do, they strip the bark and they soak it. And then they get a log. And then they would lay it over the log and they get a stick of a particular kind. They would search for a log of a kind of wood that sounded nice, almost like a bell. And so they would get the log and then they would beat it in one direction, then turn it in the other direction and beat it till you're getting down to the fibers, then lay some others on top in a different direction and beat them all together. And gradually, by beating several layers together, they would make a cloth that was, would last a fair amount of time. Okay? You never took it swimming, though, which is what shocked the first Westerners who came when they saw these people on the beach and they all took off their clothes to swim out to the boat. Well, it wasn't because they were all promiscuous, some of them were, but it was because they didn't want to lose their clothing, okay? Because it didn't last very long in water. So anyway, this is what she was doing. But the problem was the sun was going through the sky too fast. And she didn't have time to dry it. And so she went to Maui and said, you got to do something about this. So Maui says, sure, Mom. So he figures out, I'm going to make the story short, and finally gets some magical hair from his sister, and weaves a net, gets some of his brothers, who are also called Maui, and they go up to the top of Mount Haleakala, which means House of the Sun, and they wait, because the sun is coming out of a cave, and they wait until the sun's coming out of the cave to go across the sky. And the short story is, with the magical hair, they were able to trap it. And the sun struggles, and he's holding him still in the sky. Well, then he discovers that the sun standing still in the sky is worse than the sun traveling through the sky too fast. So that's not going to work, but he can't let him go either. So they sit down and they have a ho'oponopono. They negotiate. And the result of the negotiation was that the sun agreed to go through the sky faster during part of the year and slower during the rest of the year. And in the Kumulipo, that chant that I mentioned, the quote directly from the chant says, and summer became the sun's, and winter became Maui's. Okay? That's what the chant says. So because of that, we have, even here in Hawaii, somewhat the equivalent of the seasons, but also definitely further north. Okay? And we have that thanks to Maui, and he helped the whole world by doing that. So that was the sun. Now, then the last one I'll mention here is one that can be broadened in its concept. But there was a time, also a long time ago, when people were dependent, when one of the most important drinks was ava, which most of you would know as kava. Okay? Very important drink all throughout Polynesia and the Pacific. And it was used as a ritual drink, as a sacred drink, as a healing drink. And a few people used it as a recreational drink, but you could always tell who those were because, first of all, their eyes would get all red. And then if they kept drinking enough, why, their skin would start to peel off. And, so they were always laughed at and made fun of. So not too many people did that in those days. But the problem was, the great god Kane, who lived at the top of the mountain, was the only one who knew how to make it. Well, again, we got to shorten the story here. So Maui finally, he was asked by the people, not his mother, his family this time. He was asked by a council of chiefs if he would go up and get the ava, because nobody else would do it. Everybody else was all tired. They'd have to go up to the mountain. They didn't know where to go. They'd get lost. It was cold. They had to wait. And Maui didn't mind. I mean, he knew there were going to be some monsters up there to fight, and he always enjoyed that, and some other spirits that he could talk to. So he goes up the mountain, and the chiefs are worried that's what's going to happen, because this is Maui. He's a trickster. They don't know exactly what he's going to do. But they had to use him. He was the only one. So he goes up, and he tricks Kane into giving him the secret of how to make kava. So he comes down the mountain and shares that secret with everybody. And so now everybody, nobody in the world is dependent on the gods for how to raise food, how to make things properly, the stuff that we have to eat and the stuff that we have to drink. The gods may provide the basics, but nobody's dependent on them for providing the end result. Okay? So that's thanks to Maui also. And with the end of these brief stories, I'll say an ancient traditional phrase, pipi holo kika'au, which means sprinkled is the story. What it really means is the tale is told. Now let's get into our topic. The topic is how to heal the world. Now I showed you some things that Maui did. And although these focused on Maui, those very ancient tales, still, all Maui did was bring back some information. That information had to be used, had to be refined, had to be shared, had to be developed by all kinds of other people. Okay? So he just started this little process. He didn't heal the world, but the world, a great part of it and large parts of it, were healed because he initiated something that other people cooperated in doing. Someone has to initiate it. Now, what I'd like to do here, a lot of people, when they think about the news, and they are always looking at the bad stuff. They talk about television as an example. What a waste of time. People sit in front of it like zombies, and I don't know what programs these people are watching, but they've got to be watching the simplest possible programs that, are just to pass the time or to relax or, don't have any deep meaning to them necessarily. And they're missing all the rest. And not only from YouTube, from all kinds of sources that we have today. I just want to share a few little things here. Some things that people are doing today to help others and to heal the world by expanding awareness and providing ways and means to solve problems. So what I did, there's so much out there, I had to narrow it down. So I picked one day, this past Thursday, and I picked only 3 sources. And in case you're wondering, one of them was Yahoo. One of them was a news app that I use on my iPhone. And one of them was Hawaii Public Radio. And all of these get their information from lots of other sources. So all I did was scan within 1 hour. I just scanned what was going on and what types of news. I'm not going to list all the specifics because it's way too long. But what types of news were available for that short amount of time on that one day? So, personal experiences of individuals in troubled places. So we learn what their problems are and how to understand them. New insights on animal behavior. People helping animals. The sharing of food recipes. That sounds like a simple thing, but remember, these are big things and small things, but that can have a wide effect. Health and healing of all kinds. Scientific discoveries. Stories that invoke laughter, and that's healing. Useful inventions. Much about art and culture. Extreme weather situations, so people have warning and know what to do and how to prepare. Hoax busting, that's one of the best things. There's so much false stuff that's being put on that scares people half to death. And there are news stories that tell what's really going on behind the scenes, and that helps to heal the troubled emotions for sure. Do-it-yourself projects, all about people helping people in many different ways and expanding opportunities for people. And that's a short list from a short time on one day. Now then I decided to go a little further and take one of the other things that a lot of people think is a waste of time. I have a presence on Facebook. At the current time, I have about 4,000, over 4,000 friends. And while there's so many, as a matter of fact, what they do on Facebook, if you don't know, is there's kind of like a news stream down the center of it, going on constantly. And there's so many on mine that it's almost like 24/7, nonstop new stuff. So there was no way I could do everything. So I just picked what was happening within 10 minutes. I just arbitrarily picked a 10-minute segment. What kinds of stuff was there? Now, there were a few people who loved to talk about how bad they felt or what they had for breakfast. Okay? But you'd be amazed how few that is, at least on my friends. And the great majority, these are the kinds of things that were done. Huna information, that is Hawaiian esoteric knowledge, and not from me, this is from other people sharing. Language study opportunities, the sharing of travel information. People talked about their trips and showed photos and what it was like in different places in the world. Requests for help. Lots of requests for help and lots of helpful responses. General advice for problems, teaching and learning opportunities, sharing of images from around the world, a lot of inspirational postings in words, drawings, photos, sharing of personal art and creativity, videos that expand awareness. People would share these kinds of videos. Birthday greetings, free counseling, hoax busting, yay, okay. Local news from areas in trouble so that you knew what was really going on. Practical advice and solutions, sharing of recipes, stuff to make you smile and laugh, and a lot of art and culture news. Within a 10-minute segment, okay? Hardly anybody wrote about their breakfast. All right. Now, what can we do as individuals to heal the world, or to be more accurate, help heal the world? Healing the world means healing the relationships between people and between people and their environment. This is what we're talking about. It's important for the health and the wealth and the happiness of people in general, but also for certain animals and plants. Not all of them. You've got to understand this. I'm not talking about healing the earth. The earth doesn't need healing. I'm talking about healing the world, which involves the world of people, okay, and their effects. The earth is, as a whole, and most of all the animals and plants on the earth are doing very fine, with us or without us. The earth has gone through dramatic changes before, and she probably will again, and it'll survive in some form or another. The question is, will we survive? And that depends a lot on what we do and how we act. And whatever human beings do to themselves and those creatures and plants that are mostly dependent on them. Okay? So healing the world, let's get back here, thank you. Healing the world requires awareness of what is happening in the world. Got to know that. It requires forgiveness for what has happened before. Now, mind you, as I'm saying these things, some of them will sound obvious, some of them will sound impossible. Now, the stuff, it's got to happen if we're going to heal the world. I'm not saying it's easy, but there are people doing this now. Focus on the good that's happening now and the good desired. Both of those are required. Action in the present, naturally, to solve current problems. You'd be amazed how many people are doing great things. Cooperation with others in solving the problems. Increasing individual skills to solve those problems. And sometimes that means us having to learn something new or how to do something different so that we can help. And utilizing whatever works that's consistent with the aim. Now, what does this mean? This means that we cannot use the idea that the end justifies the means. That does not work. It has been used in the past to justify any dirty, nasty thing somebody wants to do because they say, well, the aim is good. That's total nonsense. You're never going to have peace through violence, as an example. Can't happen. You're really never going to have healing, real healing, through violence or through violent means. When people do get healed through what we can consider violent means or things that produce an incredible amount of stress on the body, it's in spite of it, seldom because of it. I have to interject here. I'm certainly not against modern medicine. I'm coming out of a bit of a healing stress that I went through recently, in which I used all of my knowledge of physical, emotional, and mental stuff. Now, when we do this, we've learned through the healing, we use anything that works in this knowledge that I teach. And one of the things we learned is if you've used all of these other things and its problem is still there, you better look more closely at the physical. Because there's something physical going on or there's something physical lacking that you haven't dealt with. And what I discovered is with all of the work, I was able to relieve a lot of stress, but there was a point at which no more happened. So I went to the doctor and discovered I had something I'd never had before in my entire life, which is why I didn't know what it was. It's called swimmer's ear. And you know what brought me back to be able to give this talk today? Antibiotics. Okay? There's no violence going on there. That worked. Okay? And you take it in the proper doses and for the proper time, and you keep doing the other stuff that keeps relieving any stress that comes up, and you use whatever works. Okay? That's consistent with the aim. So don't deny a thing just for the general sake of denying it. No, I don't want to do it that way. You got to sit back and use what works. Okay. So, let's get back here. When we're using whatever works, we want to have a willingness to work. Now, we don't have to do all of these, but there's 4 ways in which we can help heal the world. Objectively, we will call it metaphysically, shamanically, and holistically. So what do we mean by that? Well, objectively, this would be what a lot of scientists are doing, and the medical doctors are doing for the most part, and a lot of things like this. There's a lot of people, scientists, peacemakers, inventors, writers, artists, and others who are participating in group action, physically, or with financial or informational support. They're already working at this objective level. You can do that too. Now, metaphysically, many people who pray, who bless, who send energy, who use telepathy, who use clairvoyance, or even astral travel, they're already working at this level. Regardless of what you think about that, there are people doing it, and it's working very well for them, and you can do this too. Shamanically, not as many people, but more and more people are healing with rituals, with spirit help, on inner journeys, and you can too. And holistically, more and more people are working with meditation, with what we call grokking, and creating resonance through self-change, and you can too. With all these different ways, there is never a situation in which you can't do anything. You may have to stretch your mind sometimes to be able to help when you are not able to be physically in a place or financially able or don't have the information that to share. There's always something you can do. When in doubt, pray. That's very powerful. When you're putting out a focused thought that someone should be better or some situation should be healed, you're helping. There's always an effect. Not dramatic enough for some people, but you're helping somebody who's involved in the situation, even if it's one of the peacemakers, or even if it's one of the firefighters, even if it's one of the people who are helping others in a disaster. There's always someone helped by your focus. So there's always something that can be done, even that, at that level. The key to healing the world is in doing whatever you can do with whatever knowledge and skill you have. Whenever a need for healing arises in your awareness, and in every present moment that it does. Pau ka'olelo. The story is told. Okay. Now, at this point, we still have time for lots of stuff, but if anybody has any questions or comments, first of all, on the presentation, this is a good time. Yes?
I noticed on my Facebook news that somebody had put in a video about Syria, and it has come to my attention in the last days. What is your opinion? There's some polls out there that people want to know, what do you think about what we should do in Syria? Well, this person in this video had a very strong opinion. Mm-hmm. And I got to listen, I made myself listen to her. I normally wouldn't have, because she was very angry and she was very frustrated at our government for what we were planning to do. And for 13 minutes she ranted and raved, and I felt so much tension. I thought, how is she really inspiring people to want to do something? Because listening to her, all I was going to do is forget this subject. So then I remembered something that you said, and it was about prayer, that we all can have an effect if we believe it. And so I wrote back on that survey that peace will come on this planet when everybody believes in peace and prays for peace for the whole planet, but then believes that every thought is a prayer. You just can't pray and then go off and rant and rave. You can't do that, because the ranting and rave counteracts or stresses you out and limits the effectiveness of your prayer. So I think that helped me remember your teaching of every thought is a prayer. You have to recognize that every thought is having its effect, not just the formal, what we call prayers.
Sure, it's going to help. Even the formal will help, but if you can turn every good thought into a prayer, that's helping even more. Yes.
And that's what I learned from you many, many years ago was, what am I thinking? Where is my focus? Am I happy? Am I blessing? Because I was one of those protesters, and I was very sick in my life. There are a lot of things wrong in our world, and there's a lot of things good. And
a lot of things
to choose.
There are a lot of things that need healing.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Yes.
Say something more about holistic healing.
Okay, sure. A little bit more about the holistic method. Well, the kind of meditation I'm talking about is a kind of meditation where you simply meditate on a concept or a feeling. Let's suppose you were meditating on peace. You don't meditate intellectually. You meditate on feeling peace, and you meditate on an awareness of peace. Right? For instance, if we look around this room and we were doing a meditation, hey, this is a very peaceful room right now. Okay? But filling yourself with that just expands outward and reaches others. So we don't end at our skin. People talk about sometimes having an energy field. We don't just, we do have an energy field, which is infinite. Right? There's no place where it ends. Depending on what we're focused on, we can have more of our focus here or there, but let me put it this way, give you something to think about. We take the point of view in this knowledge that the universe is infinite. Now, if you take that point of view, you have to take the consequences. Because you cannot have a piece of infinity. It stands to reason logically that if the universe is infinite, everything in the universe has to be infinite. Now you can have individual focus, or if you're the universe as a whole, you can have multiple focus. Maybe that's what we are. But every part of that universe has to be infinite. Well, now if we take that again further logically, when you think a thought, it goes everywhere. It doesn't mean all these other points of focus listen to it. But there will be some who do. In an infinite universe, got to be some who do. Okay? So you're going to have an effect. How much of an effect? There's no way to calculate that. But if the universe is infinite and you're part of that infinity, there's got to be an effect. Okay? And so take whatever there is. The more similar thoughts that go out, and it doesn't have to be at the same time, the more similar thoughts that go out, the greater the effect. We're seeing an effect of that right now. If we want to use the news reports, Syria was brought up as part of the news. Right now, our government has decided to wait and consult the will of the people through Congress, which just a few days ago was not intended. But with the reaction of the people, it seemed the best thing to go along with that rather than be the sole thing against everybody, including your own people. That doesn't work. So it wasn't a back down, it was smart. Recognize what the situation is, go with the situation. Go with the reactions of the people. And so what people were thinking had an effect, and it wasn't just all the ones who wrote, it was all the people who were thinking it. So we see a beautiful example of this that happened. Small, tiny one, but there's an influence there. And look what happened, we know, with the British Parliament. Totally unexpected. The people didn't want this. So they have a system whereby they could vote it down. And that was very impressive. So we do have an effect, we do have an influence. Now, I went way away from the idea of meditation, but meditation is this idea of meditating on a concept without having to think about it. So that's why it's awareness and feeling. And there have been experiments in the past where this has had a measurable effect on certain situations, and why they keep referring to these particular situations and why there aren't a lot more of them, I don't know. But when enough people are meditating in some way, that has an effect on the environment and the people in the environment. So that's the meditation holistically. I mentioned a word called grokking. Grokking is a term we use for consciously doing your best to resonate with the spirit of something so that you're vibrating at a very similar rate, so to speak. We do this a lot with weather. So there's different ways to work with weather, but we did this recently with hurricanes. A number of us did it this way. We can say we tuned into Hurricane Flossie came and went and never touched land, contrary to all expectations. Well, when she was getting close, I posted on Facebook, I said, all you weather workers out there, let's do something about this. We want her to get weaker. I didn't use the word weaker. We want her to get slower, and we don't want her to touch land. So we began working days before she got close. And that's exactly what happened. She came within a certain distance and then turned north and turned north and turned away and gently fell apart. Okay? Now what we were doing was, I'll tell you how this works briefly. we were getting in tune with the spirit of the hurricane. The process for that is something like imagining that you're the hurricane. Okay? And not just as a mental, but also at a feeling level. In our ideas about this puts you at a communication level, and you become aware of what the hurricane is willing to do and not willing to do. And so what you do is simply put it's kind of like a mental weight to add a little emphasis to one of the things that the hurricane is willing to do, which is the least destructive. And it's just really focusing on that one while you're connected deeply. And so this helps change the hurricane, well, not change its mind, it helps it pick that one over others. Because the hurricane was definitely not going to go south. That was out of the question. But north without touching land, okay, that sounds like fun. And that's exactly what happened. So that's the grokking part of holistically. The other part is an ancient idea that comes from Taoism, really, the first time it's been written down. It's more ancient than that. But it has to do with the idea with that if you want the peace in the world, become peaceful. You begin the process of being the change that you'd like to see come about. And that's resonance through self-change. Okay, that help? Okay. Anything else? Yes.
So you know, you're the magician.
What's that?
I said, you're the magician.
Oh, well, I use magic. I use the things that I learned, and I help other people to do it too. Yeah, right. Some people call it magic.